Okay, so your GMO greetings, yet I say we thank you everyone for tuning in once again. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Ranehambata, Akan Odwirafo of Akwamu Mind Amaruka TV Movie, Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojira Mind, the purified nation, Afurakani people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So we are back on tonight. We wanted to touch on an important subject. We published a book a number of years ago dealing with this subject in detail, a series of articles that we published dealing with the linguistic and cosmological origin of the term God as well as goddess and so forth. We published the book. We did, some analysis of the book on Blog Talk Radio back in the day when we were doing Blog Talk Radio. In some of our online courses, we've touched on the book as well, but we wanted to bring this forward once again in a new light. One of the reasons we are putting it out, in a new light, reintroducing people to the book, and let me show you the book itself. Okay. All right, so this book, Anidaho Awareness, this is one of the books. When you go on my website, on the Nhoma page on the website, the publications page, and I'll just flip that over right quick just so you can see it. So this is the Nhoma page. This is where you will find this book, as well as all of our 31 books. So once you get to about the 6th or 7th, so this is the book right here. So I've published 31 books to date on various aspects of Afurakani, Afurite, meaning African, ancestral religion, culture, nation building, holistic health, a number of different topics and so forth. You can download the ebook versions of all 31 books for free from our website, from the Nhoma page on our website. And I'll put that link in the chat room right now just so you can check it out. Okay, so any one of those books you can download for free. And we released this particular book about, actually, 2013, so-called 2013. That was the year. So it's a series of articles, and we published a series of articles, different topics, and we put them all together for this particular volume. Now, we're going to deal with the first two articles in this series because they're germane to the topic. A few years back, there were a number of individuals going online and doing broadcasts and writing articles. Some have written books, trying to put forward the silly notion that nigger is originally an ancient term from ancient Kamit. It means God, and it represents our ancient spiritual power and the Kundalini energy. And the reason why the whites in our spring, the white man doesn't want us to use the term nigger because it takes us away from our divine power, and they're trying to hide our divine power from us. So we need to start calling ourselves niggers because nigger means God. Pure stupidity, foolishness, but you have pseudo scholars, pseudo spiritualists, pseudo authors, and so forth putting this false information out. So we put forward the actual etymological origin of the term, Negro, nigger, and all of that. But in the context of that, we also had to address the etymological origin and the cosmological origin of the term God, which is found in the language and culture of ancient Kamit. It does not come from Proto-Germanic. It does not come from the Proto-Indo-European language family and so forth. We put that forward because even quote unquote African-centered scholars, certain Afrocentric African-centered scholars who did not do the research. They simply repeated the misinformation that's been put forward by Europeans for, centuries. That term God comes from, ancient, Proto-Indo-European, and it does not. They didn't look in the cosmology of our culture of ancient Kamit. So on one hand, you can't talk about ancient Kamit and the culture and the tradition and our ancestry and so forth, but not understand the cosmology. And we prove that in the book, and then we go into some more detail. So let's get into it. First, though, just to set the tone, if you look at the reason why we use this particular image, so this is a very important collage and so forth, and it gets to the root of the matter. You'll see this is Amen, the great God, sitting on his throne. Sometimes he's called Amen Ra. Sitting next to him is Amenet, the great mother, sometimes called Amenet Ra'et. But you have Amen and Amenet together, two halves of the divine whole. Now, many of the pseudo scholars and pseudo, researchers and so forth who are talking about nigga means God and all this other foolishness, and they'll talk about Kamit, or they may have been to Kamit a number of times, or even taking people on study tours or writing about it, doing videos about it and so forth. They have talked about Amen, they've talked about Ra, they talk about Ma'at. They haven't mentioned Amenet, the great mother, one time. They may have taken people on study tours to Kamit, have never seen Amenet and knowing her to be the great mother and never mentioned her until we started publishing on it, and they had to backtrack and begin to pretend like they were talking about it the entire time, except the reality is when you look at their past, writings and speeches and so forth, they never mentioned her because they never studied the cosmology, never studied the language in the true sense in connection with the cosmology, and are not practitioners of the ancestral religious practice in an authentic fashion, so they wouldn't know who Amenet actually is. So let me show you a quick representation of what we're talking about. I'm going to take you to our page. So the last time we did a tour to Kamit, we did some video. Of course, this is our page talking about our tour, study tour to Kamit and so forth. But these particular clips are important. So let's just show this one. So what this short video is showing, when we were in the temple of Apet Setu, which is the so-called Karnak, showing Amen and Amenet together in relief, as well as the statuary of ancient Kamit, the colossal statues and so forth. People have gone back and forth to Kamit for decades. When you go and see these pillars, if you know who you are looking for, you'll see Amen there, you'll see Amenet there, you'll see them together and so forth. You'll have individuals who are publishing and talking about Kamit and talking about culture and the spirituality and so forth and the balance of male and female. They will take their tour group to Apet Setu, so-called Karnak. They will stand in front of the pillars. They will see Amen there with his great, plumes out of the crown and so forth. They'll say, this is the God, Amen. This is who the Christians and Muslims and others, so-called Jews in their prayers with the name Amen and so forth. And then they will move right along because they don't read and write the Medutu. And even if they've studied the reading and writing of the language, they never studied the cosmology. And of course, they don't practice the tradition. So they don't even know that this is Amenet, the great mother, standing right next to Amen. So they take tours and people go and so forth, and they don't know who they're looking at. So we did this video just to show how easily she can be found. So this is Amen, this is AMENET. As soon as you walk in as soon as you walk in, I've got a section right there. Multiple pillars, you will see them if you know where to look. We'll show another image of them on another pillar. And this is not something that's hidden. All you have to do is look and see, read the language. You can even see the iconography first before you look at the language. This one's a little damaged, but that's Amen. Female divinity wears the same kind of crown, the red crown, so some people assume that was her, but her name is written right next to her face. AMENET, colossal statue, this is Amen. So what's important about that is imagine, taking the time to travel to Kamit and so forth and go to these different temples, and then you find out when you come back that it was kind of male-centered. They talk about Amen, they talk about Ra, they don't talk about AMENET, the great mother, they don't talk about Ra'et, the creatress. We deal with Ra and Ra'et. Now, but let's get to the book itself. And that is very important because it's central to understanding who the divinities are. So as we said, we did a two-part series, a two-part article series. It started off just to disprove the foolish and false information about the people trying to promote this silly idea that nigger means God and all this other foolishness, but then we get into the cosmology. So, when people would see this in the Medutu and the hieroglyphs, and we've taught a two-part course, 6 weeks for part 1, 6 weeks for part 2, and that's on our website if you'd like to take that course. It's an archive course to learn to read and write the Medutu Toro, the language of ancient Kamit and so forth. But when you see in the hieroglyphic dictionary, this particular dictionary is the Budge dictionary. There are many dictionaries out, and we've compared the language of ancient Kamit and Kamit with the Akan language to show the same words, same meaning, same deities, same functions in creation and so forth. So we can take a hieroglyphic dictionary for words that are from thousands of years ago, and take an Akan tree dictionary, of our people who speak the Akan tree language in Ghana and Ivory Coast, and many of our people who were taken from Ghana and Ivory Coast, the regions of Ghana and Ivory Coast, and forced into North America. We are Akan by descent and so forth. But the people of Ghana and Ivory Coast today who speak the Akan language, the tree language, you take a tree dictionary, put it side by side with the ancient Medutu Toro dictionary, hieroglyphic dictionary, you find the same words, same meanings, multi-tiered meanings, cosmology, deities, and so forth. And we've done that research for over 20 years. So when you see this term, it's really in the wavy line is the G, and the receptacle here is the wavy line is the N, and the receptacle here is the G. So that's ng, N and G. Ng. It means to cackle. In GG, and in Budge's dictionary, back in the day, over 100 years ago, there was a convention amongst Egyptologists where if they didn't know the vowel placement between two consonants, if the Medut for N is written, the wavy line, the Medut for G is written, the little shrines, receptacle, and so forth. If they didn't know what the vowel was, should it be N-O-G? Should it be N-I-G? Should it be N-A-G? E, and so forth. If they didn't know what the vowel placement was, the convention was to simply stick an E in between consonants as a placeholder until they figured out later on what the actual vowel placement would be. And once they figured that out, they would remove that E if it wasn't an E, and they would put the correct vowel placement there. That was the convention back then when this dictionary was put forward. But it's actually, and very often, the words written in the language of Kamit would be written without the vowels. Sometimes the symbols that represent the vowel sounds, which do exist, would be included, and sometimes they would not be. But since the people knew what the words were, it wasn't a problem for the people living at the time. It became a problem for researchers, thousands of years later, because they didn't know how to pronounce the terms. Thankfully, since the Akan people and other people on the continent still speak the direct genetic descendant of the language, we have the proper vowel placements for these terms. So, if you look at the term, in fact, let me just give you an example of that real quick, just to prove that before we go forward. This is a short little article we wrote, precursor to the dictionary, comparative dictionary, Akan vocalizations of our ancestral language of Kamit. And we put this forward just to show, once again, for example, in the language of Kamit, you see the term, kes. So the little bowl with the lip at the end is the K sound, and the bolt, the horizontal bolt, is the S sound. So that's KS. Once again, the convention in Egyptology would be to place an E in between the two consonants if they did not know what the vowel placement was. So it's really KS, but they stuck an E because they didn't know. To chatter foolishly, to jest. You look in the Akan dictionary, casa, to talk much, talk noisily, to dispute, to altercate, to wrangle, to chatter. Kas, to chatter foolishly. Casa, talk noisily, chatter. That is the same term in the Akan language that's spoken every day today by our people, the Akan people in Ghana and Ivory Coast, and those of us who speak the language here in the Western Hemisphere, still using the same term. And we have the proper vowel placement, the same term, same definition, but also the proper vocalization. Casa, so it's not kes, it's casa. And even in the Coptic dialect, the late period dialect, you'll see KEC, which is kaskes. So we say casa, same term. Okay. Just a couple of additional ones. If you see him, to roar, to bellow, cry, roar, bellow, battle cry, in the language of Kamit. In Akan, hama, boisterous. The sea rages as when we're agitated by a storm, raging and so forth. So him, which is really HM. They didn't know if it was an E, if it was an O, should it be home, or him, or whom. They didn't know, but in Akan it's hama, same term. So we have the proper definition, but we also have the vocalization. You have kai, which is the lip, the bow with the lip, the little eagle, and the two strokes, which is the I or E sound. But you also have a spelling, which is the bowl with the lip, which is the K sound. And then you also have the eagle, which is the A sound, and the determinative of the man. So it's Ka. So kai or ka, to think out, to devise, to meditate, to speak, repeat, to say, cry out, call out, tell out, and so forth. Ka or kai. In Akan, you have ka, to emit a sound, to utter, speak, say, tell. So ka meaning to speak, say, or tell. In Akan, is ka or kai, to speak out, say, tell out, call out in ancient Kamit. Same term, same meanings, proper vocalization. So, and we can show that for literally thousands of terms. So that's just some proof of what we're talking about. Just so people understand that we're on firm ground when we talk about these, the language and so forth. We have the same words, but also the cosmological meaning. So, ng, it's not neg, it's ng. Ng, to cackle. Ngg would be nganga. And then you see later to cackle, to quack, as in a goose or a gander, to cackle, to quack, and so forth. Then they'll say negaga, but it's really ga, ga, to cackle, to quack. Simply the sound that the goose or gander makes. So in the same fashion, one of the terms for cat in ancient Kamit is M-A-U, meow, meow. Same thing in Akan, M-E-O-W, meow. Why is that? Of course, because that's the sound that naturally emerges from that entity, a meow. So we identify that entity by the sound that naturally emerges from that entity. So one of the terms for cat in Akan is meow. Another term for cat is akra. It's the same term for soul and so forth, because it represents purity, and cats are always purifying themselves by licking their fur and so forth. But the other term for cat is meow, because that's the sound that it makes. Children do the same thing. If a child sees, a little baby sees a dog and the dog woofs at them and so forth, they will point at the dog and call it a woof woof, because that's the sound that comes from the dog. In ancient Kemet, the term for a lion is ru, R-U, ru. Why is that? Because the lion says ru when they roar and so forth. They say ru. So the word for lion is ru, R-U. The word for cat is M-A-U, meow. The word for a goose or a gander, or to cackle, the sound that comes from the goose or gander, is ga or ga, ga, and also ga, ga. And this is what we're looking at in the language of Kemet, directly related to the actual entity and the sound that naturally emerges from that creature in creation, that sacred creature in creation. So, so then you have related terms. Nga, a cackler. This is not neg or neg or neg gaga or. This is where people who don't study the language made the mistake. So they saw that, said neg or, they said, oh, that's nigger, and nigger must mean God, and the white man is trying to hide our sacred language of nigger meaning God, so we need to start calling ourselves nigger because that stimulates our kundalini energy and it gives us our power back, and they're trying to hide us from our true nature as niggers. Pure stupidity. But this is what our people, some of our people began to say, and some people got popular making these foolish pronouncements on the internet and doing speeches and getting paid for speeches to teach this nonsense. So they didn't realize that in this particular dictionary, the Egyptologists used the E as a placeholder if they didn't understand the vowel placement. They also didn't understand the function and the features of the language. This is not neg or, it's actually ganga or. The goose goddess who laid the sun egg, the great goddess in the form of the sacred Achinebois, the sacred animal totem, the goose who lays the golden egg from which the sun will be born at the beginning of creation. So, Nganga, the great goose, and Ur means great. Ur in our ancient Kemet means great. Ura in Akan means great, or great or large, or, high office in society. So this is Nganga Ur. And there are various spellings. Nganga Ur. And we have proof of that. So you have that, different spellings of that in different texts and so forth, showing that it represents a divinity. When you see the seated, shrouded figure, represents a divinity. But then we get to the proof when you look at the related spelling. Here you have gan, gan, or. Once again, the E is not the vowel placement. We know that it's the A. The goose god who laid the cosmic egg. Why do you have it as quote unquote neg neg or here, or neg or here, but it's really ngaga or ngangan or. And then you also have the variation that proves the point, gan, gan, or. When you understand the languages of Afuraka, Afrikaid Africa, you will find that the nasal is often placed before the G and some other consonants, and is pronounced as a nasal. So, gangan ur, meaning the great, ur, ganga, is also ganga ur. The nasal becomes a prefix. So, ganga becomes ganga, ganga, but the root is gan, gan, ur. And the gan is just simply reduplicated. We have a doubling principle in Afurakani, Afrikaid languages all across the continent, and we maintain that here. So even if you have somebody's name is, Jay, and they call him JJ, or Joe, they call him Jojo, we have a doubling principle to put an emphasis on a certain quality. Gang is the root. Sometimes it's written GN to show the nasal, gang, 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 and so forth. But that's the term. And then we show them side by side. It's not neg or, neg or, neg gaga or. It's actually ganga. This is gaga. This is ganga. This is ganga. And this is the proof. The variation of the spelling, gan, or. And then another variation from the BD means Book of the Dead, but this book of coming forth by day, ga, or. They show the actual eagle. Sometimes they'll call it a vulture, but it's that African fish eagle. The sound. So ga, but it's a nasal A. And when you see this particular spelling with the wavy line for the N at the bottom, the G-N, that represents the nasal. So they can spell it with the vowel, or they can spell it with the wavy line for the N. They're showing it's not ga, or, it's ga. If you say ga with a nasal, ga, the G-A-H, ga, becomes gang. If you say A with a nasal, it's ang. So that's part of Afrikaid languages, and they represent that nasal with the wavy line for N in ancient Kamit, in the Medutu for ancient Kamit. So you can spell it this way, ganga, or you can spell it with the proper vowel placement, but the people who spoke the language, they knew that it was ga, or. Now, or means great, much superior, very greatness, great size, great man, great god, prince, chief, noble. Urt, feminine, great woman, great thing, great eldest, how very great, and all of that. Now let's go back quickly. When you see a goose and a gander, the male and female, entity and so forth, if you listen to them, and you can Google, on YouTube, listen to the geese, making their sounds. They use various terms to talk about how they sound. Some will take a horn and say it's honking, the goose is honking. Some will say they cackle. Some will say, they give different terms for the representation of their sound. But if you listen to them, they say ga, nga, nga, nga. And we simply repeated that. Ga or nga, nga. That's what it is. So Amen and Amenet, the great God and great goddess, the great mother and great father, they are represented in their sacred animal totem form as the great goose and the great gander. And we're going to show that in a second. So we said ur means great. And then we say neg or nga means to cackle, ngaga to cackle to quack, ngaga to cackle to quack, and nga is a cackler. Nga means to cackle to quack is also a title meaning a cackler, or a honker or a cackler, and so forth. We say in the cosmology of Kamit, at Ta'apet, or so-called thieves, it is revealed the great divine Nganga, the great cackler. Instead of saying goose, we'll say the Nganga, the one that makes the sound Ganga, the cackler, the Ganga entity. In the form of the great Ntoro, the great divinity, Amen, cackles at the beginning of creation and causes the primordial waters of Nun and Nanet to begin to vibrate. The primordial waters of Nun and Nanet, within the great black substance of space, ultimately give birth to Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, who manifests as fire and light, piercing through the blackness, eventually manifesting through the Aten, the sun. Now, let's give some proof of what we're talking about. So, Amen and Amenet are shown, and this is actually from one of the shrines in ancient Kamit, and this is the reason we use this imagery. As the great goose and great gander, this is one of their sacred animal totems in Kamit. They would show Amen and Amenet as a male and female. They would show Amen and Amenet as a goose and a gander. The great spiritual goose and gander at the beginning of creation, who are sitting in the primordial black waters, so the black substance of space, the wave energy within the black substance of space. That great spiritual goose and gander are in that primordial blackness, and Amen begins to cackle, saying ga, nga, nga, and the waters, primordial waters in the black substance begin to move and wave and so forth. That sets energy into motion, and then eventually creation comes into being. But it starts off with the vibration. Of course, if you go to a body of water that's still, you hear some frogs or you hear some geese, making sounds, you'll see the water starting to vibrate. They'll talk about the primordial black substance of space, the great Ka and Kaet and so forth, stillness, no movement, no sound or anything. That's the beginning of creation. And then Amen and Amenet begin to generate sound vibrations by saying ga, nga, nga, like the great goose and great gander. And there's a vibrational frequency that starts moving within the black substance and it starts rumbling. Just like if you add heat to a pot of water, if the water is still and you add heat to it, it starts waving and rumbling and so forth. When they send sound vibrations into the black substance, that sacred, quote unquote, word caused the movement, the first movement in creation. And those waves in the black substance became to ripple so quickly that they gave birth to spheres that exploded into fire and light. And that was the birth of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, who are the grandchildren of Amen and Amenet. Now, let's switch back. So that's the cosmological foundation. And while we're on that, let me just show you that proof of that real quick. Let me switch over. So another one of the books that we published is talking about Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. Just want you to see an image of them. This is one of the books, another one of the books, 31 books I've published. And we were proving in this book that Ra and Ra'ed in the language of ancient Kamit and Kamit are called Yonkumpon and Yonkunton in the Akan tradition. They're called Odumare and Oshumare in Yoruba. They're called Da and Idawhedo in Vodun and so forth. But they're called Yonkumpon and Yonkunton, the circular serpent and so forth in the Akan tradition. But what's important here is this is Ra, that is from the temple of Nefertari in Kemet and so forth. And this is Ra'et, the creatress. So you have the creator and creatress. And they are grandchildren of Amen and Amenet, and Amen and Amenet direct Ra and Ra'et, their divine life force energy, to go out and create the world. But the creation begins with Amen and Amenet in the form of the great goose and great gander, Nganga, sending these sound vibrations into the primordial blackness, causing it to begin to ripple and wave, generating energetic force. Those waves generate spheres, just like waves in the water generate bubbles that rise up and explode. And the waves of energy generating spheres in the black substance exploded into fire and light. And the first fire and light that exploded out of the blackness was Ra and Ra'ed, expansion and contraction. And they began to spiral through the black substance of space, carving out black spheres, plugging their energy, infusing their energy into those black spheres to illuminate them. And they became stars. And this is how creation begins. This is the cosmology of our people. Now, so let's get back to the text. Just wanted to show you the difference between Amen and Amenet and Ra and Ra'ed. Now, we said we want to give some proof of the linguistic aspect of it. We talked about the Akan language and how it's the same as the language of ancient Kamit and Kemet. The same is true with the people of the Congo, the Bakongo people. Many of our people are descended from, are ancestrally Bakongo, just like many of our people in the Western Hemisphere were stolen from the Akan empires. Some of our people were stolen from the Bakongo empires and forced over here and continue to speak the Bakongo language in their ritual practices and still have that culture. So if you look at the piece right here, we talk about the Bakongo people are an example. In the Kikongo language, the term Nganga means a master, referencing a healer. So when we look at Self-Healing Power and Therapy by Dr. Fukiao, who's a great Bakongo scholar, Ganda, to be initiated, is to join the circle of Nganga, masters, and become oneself Nganga Adua. Nganga, of the archaic verbal root Ganga, of which the modern form is Vanga, to do, to make, to act, to realize, is a Mvangi, an individual of deeds, Mavanga, and so forth. Then we say through Kukanga or Congo, one learns to discover one's own sun or package of life, its power and radiations, the genetically, spiritually, and physically inherited strength of self-healing power. Once a Kukanga or Congo, the candidate must learn to speak the language of Ki Nganga, a specialized language. Without knowledge of this sophisticated language spoken by initiator masters, one may find it hard to digest the sophisticated knowledge taught in these institutions of initiation. So it's important that the Ki Nganga, meaning the language, the Ki of Nganga, is a specialized ritual language. What's also key is the fact that Nganga comes from the root Ganga. Now, what do we say about the language of ancient Kemet? Let's just scroll back up for the proof of what we just said. We said Nganga Ur or Negaga, which is really Nganga Ur, comes from Ganga Ur. So the Nganga, the N prefix Nganga, comes from the root Ganga. In Bakongo, Nganga, the title for the healer and so forth, the master, the one who speaks the sacred ritual incantations, ritual prayers, ritual chants, and so forth, ritual incantations. The nganga, that title comes from the root ganga. There's a specialized key, a specialized language called the key nganga. That specialized language is ritual invocation. That ritual invocation spoken by the nganga, the great one in the Bakongo tradition, goes all the way back to the first nganga, which is Amen, and nganga et, which is AMENET. Same culture, same philosophy, same title, unbroken for thousands of years. And you'll see how Ga is the origin of the term God in a second. So, because of the lack of printed material, teaching constituted passing down of key principles of life through bikumu, repeated mottos, and ngana, proverbs. So, we said, note the connection between the Kikongo, nganga, and ganga. This is found in Kamit, as we just said, as nganga and gangan. Now, we said the nganga in Bakongo is typically recognized in ritual context to be a healer, medicine person, one who can call on the spirits of the deities, divine forces in creation. The nganga, which is a sacred priest and priestess. The nganga's ritual efficacy is dependent most often upon the nganga's ability to make proper ritual invocations, prayers, chanting. This is true of Afurakani, meaning African traditional healers, healers in general. Proper, effective, invocatory chanting moves the energy of forces in creation. So we don't pray in English. When someone learns ancestral religion and culture and so forth, we don't pray in the English language. We don't project that perverse set of vibrations. We learn the language of our ancestresses and ancestors, and we engage in ritual invocation, ritual prayer, apai, ritual chant, and so forth in the language of our ancestresses and ancestors, because those specific configuration of sound vibrations that make up the terms in our languages invoke and provoke the energy of the Abosom, the divinities, and the Nananom and Samanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. So their ability to make proper ritual invocations, prayers, chanting, this is true of all of our ancestral traditions in general. Proper, effective invocatory chanting moves the energy of the forces in creation and opens the way for transformation to occur. Indeed, the word chant has etymological origins in Kan, like chant comes from canto, and you even see that as Spanish. But chant comes from canto, and canto comes from kan and gan, and so forth, goes all the way back to the same thing. Now, hold on a second. So you go back to that root. We said ganga, go to the root, gan, to cry out, to beg, to beseech, a petitioner. We're talking about ritual invocation. Petitioning the divinities, petitioning the ancestral spirits, gan. So we do it as human beings, just like the goose and the gander do it with their natural sounds of ga. Moreover, the sacred proverbial wisdom of the Bakongo, ngana. Let's look back up at that. He said the ngana are proverbs, sacred wisdom, and so forth. Look in ancient Kamit, not gen, but the Bakongo will show you the proper vowel placement. So it's not gen, it's gan. Memorial, record, archive, memorandum, annals, and so forth. It's talking about what has been preserved, that's sacred, the sacred language, speech, true story, culture, preserved as gan in ancient Kamit, ngana in the Bakongo, and so forth. Same term, same meaning. Now, we say it should also be noted that Amen takes the form of a divine goose and cackles, emits sacred sound vibrations at the onset of creation. Technically, Amen takes the form of the gander, the male goose, while the great Ntorot Amenet takes the form of the goose as Gan Urit. So once again, let's show you that sacred mural from one of the temples in Medum in ancient Kamit and so forth. You have even Europeans calling this sacred mural the Mona Lisa of ancient Kamit and so forth. And this is part of that sacred mural, but this is Amen and Amenet in the form of the great goose, Amenet, and the great gander, Amen, in their sacred animal totem forms. Now, so you have Gan Ur, meaning the great Gan, Gan Ur, simply reduplicating that same root, the goose divinity who laid the cosmic egg. And here they show the determinative symbol of the goose, showing this deity is in the form of a sacred animal totem. Just like if someone said, you know, a certain boxer is like a pit bull in the ring. He's not actually a pit bull, but that's animal totem represents the energy of the individual, or he's like a lion and so forth. Amen and Amenet are like the great goose and great gander. So these animals carry their energy and so forth, and they're used as animal totems. So it's Gan Ur, the great Ur Gan, or Gan Ur, the great Ganga, the great goose or gander, the great cackler. And then Gan Urit. Urit is the feminine of Ur. Urit or Urat means great on the feminine side. Ur means great on the masculine side. Gan Urit is the great feminine Gan, the great feminine goose, and so forth. Now, as Amenet, Amenet is the female goose who lays the cosmic egg from which Ra and Ra'ed will be born. Amen and Amenet function together as one divine unit, the supreme being. As Nganga or Gan, Ur, and Nganga, Ur, Amen takes the form of a gander in order to cackle or quack, as opposed to a serpent. The serpent comes in a different aspect of the cosmology. So this is Nganga, Ur. This is the wavy line, the two little receptacles, GG, Ngaga, the determinative symbol of the gander. And then the little swallow and the open mouth symbol is Ur. So that's Nganga, Ur. And then the seated, shrouded male figure shows that this represents a deity as opposed to a human being. So it's Nganga, Ur, meaning the great deity, Nganga, and so forth. Now, as we said earlier, when we first wrote this, we were pointing out the fact that neg-ur is not the vocalization, it's not the origin of the term Negro. People trying to say Negro is neg-ur, and neg-ur is nigger and means God and pure stupidity. So we went into the etymology of the term Negro and nigger and all of that. We don't have to focus on that for this particular. When you read the book, you'll see we just show, that in detail. And Nekur, let's just scroll down real quick. So Nekah, to rub down, grind, to grain, grind, grain, and so forth. Nekah, foes crushed or beaten to death. So this is where you get nekur, and so forth. Foes or enemies that are crushed or beaten to death. That is the origin of the term Negro and necro meaning dead, and so forth. Negro. It's always been a derogatory term and so forth if you're applying it to a group of people. So Negro becoming Negra, nigger, whatever you want to say. That is not the origin of the term God. That's pure stupidity. And we show the actual etymological origin of the term Negro from neg-ur, from nek-ur, from ancient Kamit, foes who are crushed or beaten to death. So It's always been a derogatory term. Now, this is one of those sacred forms of the sacred goose or gander of Amen. This is from the mural, once again, in Medem. So now we go a little bit further into the cosmology. So we already covered this portion in part 1. The great cackler, meaning the great goose, great gander, and so forth. Then we get into the actual text, so we can prove that. From the Temple of Heb, so-called Hibis, columns 23 and 24, the hymn to Amen. Now, your ancient throne is the highland, the Ka'et of Kemenu, which they call Hermopolis. It is from the Lake of Two Knives that you reach land. It is from the water surface that you appear in the hidden egg, AMENET being with you. The reason why we quoted that is because they're showing from, in this particular temple, the Temple of Heb is a late period temple of Kamit, one of the most well-preserved temples, because it was in the Western desert near the oases and so forth. So it wasn't plundered, so it's very well preserved. In a late period text, they talk about Amen and Amenet at the beginning of creation together. When you go back to the pyramid text, the Meru text, the oldest religious compositions in existence, you'll find that Amen and Amenet are found together as well. Hold on one second. Grab this water real quick. So we wanted to show that late period text showing that even by the time we were at the end of the dynastic period of Kamit, they were still showing that Amen and Amenet are together. When we showed you the image of Amen and Amenet sitting on their thrones, found in the temple of Apet Reset, so-called Luxor. We showed you Amen and Amenet together on the columns in the temple of Apet Asedu, which is so-called Karnak and so forth. But even in the late period, by the times the Persians had invaded Kemet and they're copying texts from our people and so forth and placing them in the temples, they're still talking about Amen and Amenet together, the great father and great mother as a supreme being. Now, we go a little bit further in the text to prove our point. The Leiden Papyrus I-350, chapter 90, very popular, famous text and so forth. Light was his coming into existence on the first occasion, with all that exists in stillness for all of him. He, meaning Amen, cackled by voice as the great cackler. That's the translation of Gan Ur, great Ur Ganga. So Amen in the text is called the great Ganga or the great Ur Gan, coming into a land that he created for himself. He began speaking in the midst of silence, opening every eye and causing them to look. He began crying out when the world was in stillness. His yell or his cackle circulated while he had none like him, so that he might give birth to what is and cause them to live, and cause every man to know the way to walk. Their hearts live when they see him. And also from the Leiden Papyrus I-350, chapter 100, the one who initiated existence on the first occasion, Amen, who developed in the beginning, whose origin is unknown. No deity came into being prior to him. No other deity was with him who could say what he looked like. He had no mother who created his name. He had no father to beget him or say, "This belonged to me." He who formed his own egg, power of secret birth, who created his own beauty. So this was a series of hymns to or praises to Amen in this particular papyrus. So they were just giving his various attributes in a poetic way and so forth. They were talking about him. But what they were saying was, when you talk about Ra and Ptah and Asar and the various different divinities, they were saying none of these deities were created before Amen. He was there from the beginning. No one could say, I saw him when he was created. He didn't have a mother or father, because he is the great father. And when they talk about AMENET, of course, they talk about her as the great mother as well. This particular series of texts was simply praises to the divinity Amen, and so they were focusing on him at that particular time. But it doesn't negate the reality that AMENET has the same, attributes. So she is Ga, Uret. He is Ga, Ur. They are the great Ga, or the great Ga. That is the origin of the term Ga, or God, and so forth. And let's prove that. So when we talk about Gaga or Gangan, cackling, honking, the primordial waters of the black substance of space, in the unformed matter began to vibrate. Separation took place as the divine egg was formed within the great goose and so forth. And if you consider, as we said again, the black substance of space is the first thing that was created by Amen and Amenet. So it's this great black substance. It's like a thick black substance. All the planets, suns, moons, and stars exist within that black substance. That black substance is called Ka on the masculine side and Ka'et on the feminine side. And we go into a great deal of that cosmology in some of our books. But Amen and Amenet began to cackle within that black substance, and the sound vibrations caused that black substance to begin to vibrate. Just like if you have, as we said before, if you have some water, which is a formless substance, when you add heat to it, it begins to vibrate, and all of a sudden waves of energy begin to move throughout the pot of water. It's moving, vibration, and energy is now manifest in the water. Before it was just still, now there's energy. But the vibrations continue to move so rapidly that they begin to form spheres. And those spheres rise up out of the water as bubbles, and they pop. And there's heat, of course, in the spheres, when you add heat to the water and so forth. Those spheres are like eggs that were formed within the primordial substance after it got going by the vibrations that you added. This is what they're talking about in the black substance of creation. When Amen and Amenet sent their sound vibrations, it started causing the vibrations, wave energy, Nun and Anet within the black substance. The wave energy created spheres or an egg and so forth that rose up and exploded in the form of fire and light, similar to, lightning exploding in the darkness of the sky and so forth. But the male divinity Ka, the female divinity Ka'et, that make up the black substance of space, Europeans now call them dark energy and dark matter, that make up 99+% of the universe. And all the planets, suns, moons, and stars exist within this black substance. We call that Ka and Ka'et. So this is what we're talking about here. And then we even show the etymological origin of the term goose, which is gans and so forth. Gas, same root in reality. But that's a form of, if you think about Amen and Amenet in the primordial waters and so forth before creation, when they would see a goose and a gander and they stick together and so forth throughout life, they're monogamous very often. You see them, they can swim through the water, they can walk on land, they can fly through the air. They can traverse every aspect of creation. So you see the goose and the gander operating in the waters and so forth, and they begin to say ga, 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 and the waters begin to vibrate. That's a great representation of what took place spiritually at the beginning of creation. You have the great being, Amen and Amenet, in the primordial blackness and so forth. They set forth their ga, ga, as the great ga, ga, and so forth, caused the vibrations, the movement, the energy to launch creation into existence. Now, we observe the actions of the geese when they reach maturity, about 3 years old. The male tends to be more dominant and aggressive than the female, especially in mating season. The male is more protective of the nesting area as well. Listen to the sounds of geese. The male goose lets out a high-pitched honking or ga-ga sound to attract the female when they are ready to mate, while female lets out a low-tone quack or ga when she is ready to mate. So the cackling, honking, or quacking, the ga-ga, is related to mating. When AMENET and AMEN, as the great ga-ga and ga-gaet, are ready to mate, to create the universe and so forth, of course, they began to say ga-ga, they began to cackle, set the primordial waters in motion. So these sound vibrations cause the waters of the womb within the great mother AMENET to vibrate as Nun and Anet. These dark waters are the dark waters of the black substance of space and so forth. And this is where we get it. So ga-ga, of a bird to cackle, ga-ga-ur, the great cackler, ga-gaet, a goddess, and so forth. And we went through that. We even go further. We're talking about ritual invocation. Ga also means to sing. In the ritual context, you see the two hands in this fashion in Kamit. You'll see that is ritual invocation of projecting energy from the hands to the divinities and so forth. So ga, to sing in a musical instrument and so forth. That's sacred ritual song, to sing, to praise, ritual invocation and so forth. So it's not just any kind of sound, it's a ritual. Ga means a ritual invocation. And ga, God, to sing and so forth, all related to ganga, to beseech, to sing, to petition, all these different things. Then you also have the term ganu, a bird, a crane, and so forth. But here's the piece that ties everything to the word God. We just saw ga and gan, meaning the bird and the cackling. Ganu, which is plural, metal pots or vases. Ga is singular, but gan, the U in ancient Kamit is plural. So just like the S at the end of words in English is plural, so you have pot, plural is pots. In ancient Kamit, gan is a metal pot or vase. Ganu, you don't put an S at the end, you put a U. Ganu is metal pots or vases. Then you have gaet, a bottle, a wine pot. And then this is the important piece that ties it all together. The two lips of the vessel right here is pouring the water out in a stream, as you can see the wavy line. So you have the term, for example, gash, the two lips of a pot and the wavy water line being poured out. To spill, to pour out, to sprinkle, to bedu, a pouring out, but an inundation. Then you have gai, same thing as pouring out. Now, why is that key to everything? Gosh, an inundation, a great pouring out. Of course, that's the origin of the term gush, like a gusher or something to gush out and so forth in English. That comes from gosh in ancient Kamit, but that's a lot of water pouring out. But just a little bit is ga, to pour out. Gai, to pour out. And you see the lips of the vessel and the water pouring out. Even when you're pouring the water out, and if you listen to it and it's streaming out from a pot, one of the reasons the pot is called ga is because if you were to replicate that sound, it would say ga, 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 ga when you're pouring the water out And if you imitate that, that's what you get. So the release of the water from the pot is ga, 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 just like the release of the sounds from the great goose and great gander at the beginning of creation is ga, ga, ga. Same thing. That's why we use the same terms to represent these same two principles. So the wavy water energy pouring out from the lips of the and beak of the goose and gander, just like the water pouring out from the lip of the vessel and so forth, same thing. Pouring out of energy necessary for the birthing of the universe. Now, what is the etymological origin, according to them, of the word God? And why don't they know what the real origin is? What do they say about that? Old English God, supreme being, deity, all of that. Old Frisian Dutch God, German Gott. And most people will stop with German and say, well, it's a German word that means, Gott, and that's what it is. But then when you look at the Proto-Indo-European root, gut, that which is invoked, to call, now we're talking about calling or invoking. From the root, go, to call, invoke. So first and foremost, they'll say it comes from the Proto-Indo-European root, to call or to invoke. Invoke is to voke or vocalize, vote from within. So you invoke something, you're calling from within. So they're saying to call or invoke. Go or goe means to call or invoke. And they'll say that is the origin of the term God, to call or invoke. As you can see, they stole it directly from the great goose and great gander cackling or calling forth creation, God. Then they say, but some trace it to the Proto-Indo-European root guto, poured, from root go, to pour, pour a libation. Source of the Greek kind to pour, also in the phrase Kutgaya, poured earth, referring to a burial mound. So, according to them, the origin of the term God is either to call or to invoke, go, goe, to call or invoke, or to pour a libation. They think those two things are two separate meanings, and they don't know which one it is. They don't know why g and ga, or go means to pour, invoke, and go means to call, it means to pour libation, or go means to call or invoke. They just know that sound, g and together, means to invoke, to call, but it also means to pour. They don't know why, because they stole the term from our languages. Why doesn't sisi mean to pour or to invoke? Why doesn't huru mean to pour or invoke? All they know is that the G sound and the sound, gon or gan, means to pour, and it also means to invoke, but they can't tell you why, because they stole the term from our language and then claimed it as theirs and called it Proto-Indo-European. We can prove exactly why g and means to call, because it comes directly from God, the sound of the great goose and the great gander who called forth creation. And we can also show you why g and as ga means to pour, because it means that in our ancient languages, the sounds pouring out of the lips or beak of the sacred goose and gander, but it's also the term for pot, pouring out. Same term, ga or gai, to pour, from the gai or ga, the pots. And it's the petition, ga, of the cackle, ganga, of the great ritual invocation to sing, to petition, coming from the great ganga. So they can't give you the definition because they don't have the cosmology. They don't know the cosmological link between pouring and invoking being the same term because they don't know the cosmology. Amen is literally the great Gan, the great gander. AMENET is literally the great Gaet or Gat, the great goose, and so forth. The great Gan with the nasal N, Gan, became the great God. In Proto-Indo-European, they said Go, and later became Got and God and so forth. That comes from Gan in ancient Kamit, a title of the supreme being on the masculine side, and Gaet, which became Gaetes, which is goddess and so forth, the great title of the supreme being on the feminine side. We have the term, we have the vocalization, and we have the cosmology that undergirds the term. The Europeans don't have that. So when fools try to say it comes from Hebrew, this predates Hebrew by thousands of years, so-called Hebrew, because there's really no Hebrew language that comes from ancient Canaan, so-called Canaan and so forth. There was no ancient Hebrew people. They never existed of any race whatsoever. That's pure fiction. So, but thousands of years prior to that fictional language, we were already utilizing Ga as a title of Amen, Gaet or Gat as a title of Amenet. Predates any pseudo-Hebrew nonsense, predates Hinduism, predates the Proto-Indo-European language family. Now, we say this is the reason that the name Amen is invoked at the end of prayers in the false religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. The name was stolen by the whites in Narrow Spring and falsely redefined as a term meaning so be it. And then we go into detail, of course, in certain other books and articles about the cosmology of Amen, meaning hidden, concealed, a number of different definitions of why they use the term Amen for that. So when you have fools like Billy Carson talking about Amen was an individual who forced people to say his name at the end of prayers and talking this stupidity about aliens and all of that foolishness, everything he's saying is pure nonsense that comes from the whites and their offspring. That's just idiotic. We're talking about real culture, real language, real cosmology. We're talking about reality. Then we go into the tree language of the Akan people for verification. We speak the same language. Go, also go, to pour, to sprinkle. Shue go, to pour libation. Nsa gu, and then asanti nsa guo. Liquor and sa, pouring gu or guo, pouring libation with liquor as opposed to water or palm wine and so forth. But to pour in the Aquamo dialect is gu, and the Asante dialect is guo, guo, guo. So that's to pour in the Akan language today. So when we pour libation in Akan today, we utilize the term gu or guo. And then also in the Akan language, go is an invocation, an announcement before one enters a house. If you go to any ceremony that by an Akan person before libation is poured, and just to get the crowd's attention, and if you come into the Hoodoo tradition in North America, which is the Akan tradition, or if you even go to certain, Pan-African or Black nationalists or cultural organizations, and if they have some event like they have in speakers or they have in, some kind of cultural event, marketplace, or some kind of performance and so forth, and everybody comes to the place, you'll hear somebody yell out, Ago, and people will say, Amen, and they'll say, Ago, and Amen. They're saying in general, can I have your attention? And they're bringing everybody together by saying go or Ago. And the people respond by saying Amen. And once they say that 3 times, after saying go, Ago, and chanting that to the crowd, and the crowd responds Amen, meaning I am stilling myself and listening and balancing myself out and so forth. After saying Ago, go, go, then they take the pot or the vessel that they have with the water and they begin to pour libation. And the word for pour is guo, guo. So first they say ago. It's an invocation. The people say amen, and then they guo, they pour. They invoke, go, and then they pour, go. Invocation, go. Pouring, go. We ritualize these terms in the Akan language every day. Invocation, go. Pouring, go. And you're pouring libation to invoke the deities. When Amen and Amenet invoked first, ga, 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 and that poured out of their beaks in the form of the sacred animal totem of the goose and gander, out of their spirits and so forth, and that energy poured out and set creation in motion. They ga, ga, invoked or called out, and ga, they poured and set creation in motion. We say ga 3 times, the people respond with amen, and then we pour ga to set that ritual process in motion. We are operationalizing these terms in Akan, as we've done for thousands of years, invoking the name of Amen, and even the great god and great goddess in Akan is Nyame and Nyamewa, same Amen and Amenet in ancient Kamit. So that's what we talk about with the invocation, go, is followed by the pouring, go, the same invocation, ga, in ancient Kamit, pouring, ga, to pour, and so forth. Very important. Then we go into a little bit of some of the cosmology of Toro, meaning deity in Akan. TR in ancient Kamit is Toro in Akan, meaning divinity. Same term that we use for deity. In Vodun, they say Trowo, Trowo. They say Tro, meaning deity, and Trowo is plural. In Vodun, in Akan, we say Toro, Toro. So it's not netter. It's not the term netter. Once again, the Egyptologists placed an E in between consonants for, linguistic purposes until they could figure it out. But this is not netter and netterit. We still pronounce this every day for the term for deity, Toro in Akan, and Torot or Tong in Akan for female divinity. So we show that Toro, quote unquote netter, but it's Toro in Kamit. NTR in Kamit is vocalized as Toro in Akan and became nature, which they would try to say it's netter or netter or netcher, which is Toro. In Akan, it became nature in English. So that's the origin of the term nature. The deities are the spirit forces in nature, the spirit forces that animate the sun, animate the moon, animate the earth mother, animate the oceans, animate the rivers, animate the various planets, the black substance of space. Just like your spirit animates your body, the spirit of a dog animates the body of the dog until the dog transitions. The spirit that animates the earth mother, that is the divinity. There's a fertility earth mother, divinity, Asasiyafua, and a barren earth mother, Asasiya. But those spiritual forces animate the earth mother. The deities, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Abosom, they are the spirit forces that animate the physical features of creation. They are the spirit forces in nature. But nature is a corruption of nature, which is a corruption of Toro. And this is where that comes from. Okay, hold on one second. All right. So we were just showing that just to show some people try to put forward a pseudo etymology that some pseudo scholars tried to put forward an etymology that netter, which was really netcher and netker and netcutter and netkuru and netguru and netguru and guru means God, which is idiotic, making up pseudo etymologies to try to make a linguistic argument that has no basis in reality. But netcher was corrupted from Ntoro, and then toro became nature in English. So in Kamit, ga, in Akan, go, in Proto-Indo-European, goe. Kamit, of course, poor libation is gai. And then in Akan, go. And then Asante, in Akwamu is gu, and Asante is guo. In Indo-European, it's Proto-Indo-European, it's go, and so forth. So we show these relationships and show where it's stolen from. So we also show that ga is double as ganga, also nganga, the root is gan or ga with the nasal A and so forth. Written as in netter is ntoro, nute in Coptic, ntoro in Akan, toro in Ewe. And we're just showing that these terms are not the term for nigger. They were trying to say that, as we said, nganga means nigger, pure stupidity, ridiculous nonsense. So we also go a little bit further. The Niger River, just so people understand, the so-called Niger River is not the origin of the term nigger either. The term Niger, of the Tuareg people, they have a term. It's called ger geren. And the geren became Nigeren and Nigerian and Niger and so forth, and Niger and so forth. But it's ger geren. Ger means river, and ger geren means river of rivers, meaning the great river. Talking about the Niger River. Now, ger geren, river of rivers. The root is ger. Geren of rivers was corrupted into Nigeren and Niger and so forth. But when people try to say Niger was the origin of the term nigger and it means divine and sacred and God and all this other nonsense, it's really ger geren, river of rivers, and we can prove that as well. If you look at the language of the Tuareg people, who are ancient Nubians and so forth, if you look at the language, the term ger means stream. Another variation of that is ger, it's the little receptacle and the eagle and so forth, and the symbol of the open mouth. Ger means stream in ancient Kamit. So that's the origin of ger amongst the Tuareg people, being river or stream. Ger geren, river of rivers. That goes back to ger, meaning stream in ancient Kamit. Geren means of. Means of. It means of in Tuareg. It means of in ancient Kamit. So geren is river of rivers. That geren becoming geren, that was never even a word. That's a corruption of, that's like saying of rivers. Nigeren or Niger or Niger means of rivers. They don't even have the full term. It's really ger geren. But they took the clip of it, geren, of rivers, and said Nigeren and Niger or Niger, and said that's, that means nigger. So pure stupidity. It's one thing for Europeans to do that and misrepresent the language and so forth. It's another thing for our people to repeat that, and it's idiotic. So ga is the title of Amen. Ga is, redoubled is the title of Amen. Ga ur, title of AMENET and so forth. Always been the case. God and goddess are simply English corruptions of ga and gaet. So we wouldn't use God and goddess because those are English corruptions. That's like saying Osar in ancient Kamit, and then the Greek corruption is Osiris. We don't invoke the divinity as Osiris. That's a Greek corruption. We don't say Isis. That's Oset or Essi, but we don't say Isis. We don't say Horus. Heru or Huru is the divinity. We don't use the Greek corruption of that. Ra is the deity. We don't say Helios. That's the Greek corruption. We don't say God or goddess because that's a corruption of ganga or ga or ganga. We say the actual term. We say amen, ganga amenet, gangaet, uret, and so forth, or urat. We would say that, but we don't say God and goddess. Unless we're just, referencing the origins. And once again, we went into some detail about neg and negor and neg, and the root of neg is negative and all of that. And we were proving that point once again. So that's what we were saying in that. And then the final piece we had to touch on once again, because misinformation, once again, we had to correct the record. So we said that our people who have accepted the false concept of what a god or a goddess is from the whites and their offspring, of course, we're going to misdefine it. Instead of properly defining it, we have this misdefinition. Then we take this false definition we got from them and try to apply it to our lives, which makes it even more ridiculous. So one of the manifestations of that, let me just scroll this up. The association of the Supreme Being with fictional white characters such as Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Esau, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Buddha, Brahman, Yahweh, Allah. None of them existed of any form or of any race whatsoever. In our book, Kuku Tuntum, The Ancestral Jurisdiction, we prove that all of these characters are fictional. There was no black Yeshua, Yahweh, Jesus. There was no black Muhammad. There was no black Buddha. There was no black Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael. None of these characters existed of any form or of any race. They are all fictional. Allah is fictional. Yahweh, these are corruptions of fragments of text from Kamit attached to fictional white characters who never existed. So we try to trace our lineage back to fictional cartoon characters. That's no different than trying to trace your lineage to Santa Claus and the elves and trying to say you're a North Pole Elvelite and you're descended from the Elvelites. You're trying to trace your lineage back to a group of fictional characters because white people gave you a set of fictional characters. So instead of rejecting that foolishness, trying to blacken up the elves, supporters of Santa Claus, and then saying you're descendant from them and dedicating your life to being a descendant of a fictional group. That's insane. That's part of the schizophrenia of enslavement of our people, and we still operate based on that. But in our books and so forth, we prove that's, the nonsense of that. Now, another manifestation of that, same thing, talking about nigger means God and trying to make that derogatory term that comes from Nekor in ancient Kamit, meaning foes or enemies who are crushed and beaten to death. We're trying to turn that into God so we can feel better about continuing to call ourselves nigger, which is absurd. It's part of that schizophrenia that was forced upon us by embracing white culture. Instead of rejecting what they say and forcing them to prove what they say, and we won't accept it until they prove it, otherwise we just totally reject it out of hand, we embrace whatever they say and hold on to it for dear life until somebody proves it's not true. That's insane. That's what slaves do, not liberated people. Same thing that happens with us referring to ourselves as gods and goddesses. That's part of an inferiority complex. We say because we have accepted a false definition of God from the whites and their offspring, and in turn have an inferior reflection of ourselves in relation to that false definition, we then compensate by attempting to de-inferiorize ourselves through claiming that the black man is God, the black woman is God or goddess and so forth. When you have low self-esteem, you seek to make yourself feel good by chanting slogans. In reality, it's not accurate, but it makes you feel good to say, I'm a god or I'm a goddess and so forth, because deep down inside you feel inferior. So if you say, I'm God, that makes you feel good, especially when you have a false definition of what a God is that you learned from Europeans. So you take that false definition, you say, well, I'm not a human being, I'm a God, I'm greater than a human being. Of course, that's silly, that's childish. You're a human being, but you think being a human being is inferior because white people told you being a human being is inferior. So you don't want to settle for just being a human being. You have to be something else. You have to be a God. Silly, childish, ridiculous. So we say they must be God, goddess, or a spiritual being having a human experience. You are a human being. You're having a human experience because you're a human being. Imagine a squirrel saying, I'm not a squirrel, I'm a God. I'm just a spiritual being having a squirrel experience. That's silly. That's childish. We need to get away from these silly, childish notions that we learn from our enemies. Now, when you get the proper definition of what a divinity is, we say when we understand the cosmological foundation of Abadier creation, we recognize that Amen and Amenet function as one divine unit, the supreme being, two halves of the divine whole. And when we look at us cosmologically, we don't have to read the entire piece right there, but we always share. If you look at Amen and Amenet, let's just show their image once again so you can see that. So, Amen and Amenet, the great being. The Afurakani man is an emanation of Amen, just like the Afuraikaini woman, the African Black woman, is an emanation of Amenet. We are direct, on a microcosmic level, we are that. Them in miniature, so to speak. And that only goes for Afuraikaini African Black people, Hindus, Asians, Arabs, Europeans, white Hispanics, and so forth. None of them have anything to do with divinities, forces, and creation. They have no capacity to invoke the Orisha, the Abosom, the Vodou, and so forth. Only our people have that capacity. Now, if you look at your body as a great body, like the Afurakani man is a representation of Amen, the Afurakani woman is a representation of Amenet, you're a great being, and within your great being, you give birth to smaller beings. Those smaller beings are your organs, the brain, the liver, the spleen, the lungs, the heart, and so forth. And those beings regulate order within your great body or your great being. And those beings give birth to even smaller beings, which are the cells, liver cells, heart cells, brain cells, lung cells, and so forth. And when the liver cells, who are children of the liver organ, when they live in harmony with the organ, their parent organ, then they're serving you, the great being or the great deity, at the same time. When pancreas cells serve their parent deity, their parent organ, they're serving you, the great being, the supreme being, at the same time. The cells have a function, the organs have a function, and you as the being have a function. We are cells within the great divine body of Amen and Amenet. The deities, the spirits that animate the planets, suns, moons, stars, oceans, they are the organs within the great divine body of Amen and Amenet. They are the organs within the great divine body of creation. And they give birth to cells. Some of us are children of fiery divinities. We have a fire divinity that governs our head. Some of us are children of water divinities. We have a water deity that governs our head, and so forth. We are cells of these great organs. When we serve our parent deity, our parent Abosom, parent Orisha, parent Vodou, parent Ntoro, parent divinity, Arusi, we're serving the great being at the same time. Your cells have a function in your body just like your organs do. We as Nipa, which is the Akan term for human beings, Nipa, we have a function in creation. The Abosom, the forces in nature, they have a function in creation. The Moa, the animals, they have a function in creation. The Undria, the plant life, they have a function in creation. You let white people tell you that being a human being is inferior because they know that they're inferior. They don't have a functioning creation. They are the cancerous cells that developed or degenerated within the body of Black humanity. And just like the cancerous cells that develop within your body, they have a temporal existence. They are isolated by the immune system and lymphatic systems. They are destroyed and expelled from the body. We are the original people, the only people created. We've been here for millions of years. A few thousand years ago, a small group of cells became cancerous within the body of Black humanity. They were drawn into northern Eurasia. They developed into the Eurasian who spread throughout Europe and Asia and so forth. Just like cancer cells began to spread throughout the body and proliferate, they began spreading throughout Earth and so forth. But we will halt that spread, exterminate them, and eradicate them from the planet. So we'll get back to normal. We've been here for millions of years. They've been here for a few thousand, and they are already on their way out. They're not even at replacement level with regard to, the European is not replacement level with regard to population. There are more of them dying than being born in Europe as well as, the Western Hemisphere in America. So they're on their way out just by virtue of, them operating the way that they do. So they're not part of the natural creation, just like cancerous cells who used to be normal, but they became disfigured. And once they became disfigured, they began to be dysfunctional, and they seek to consume and destroy every cell in their path. They are no longer healthy cells, they are cancerous cells, and the response to cancerous cells is eradication. So they can't live in harmony with the forces in creation, just like cancer cells don't live in harmony with your heart or your spleen or your pancreas or your kidneys or your liver or any other organ in the body. Because of their own functioning or malfunctioning, they've created disorder in the body. Because of their malfunctioning, the Eurasian creates disorder on Earth. So they're not part of the natural order. They have a temporal existence and they're on their way out. So when we're talking about Amen and AMENET, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afurakadi, human life, we are cells within the great divine body. Each classification of life has a unique sacred role in creation. The deities have their role in creation within the body of the Supreme Being. To walk around saying, I'm not a human, I'm a God, because that makes you feel better because you have a false understanding of what a God or goddess is, because you've been taught that human is inferior, God is superior, and you want to be superior because you think being human is inferior because white people told you. That's schizophrenia. That's idiocy that was woven into pseudo-religious doctrines in the United States, over the past 100+ years, and some of our people are still running off of that because they don't know who they are. When you embrace your ancestral culture and religion, you have true cosmology, your place in creation, your relationship to plant life, animal life, mineral life, other Afurakani, Afurakadi, human life, the ancestresses and ancestors, the forces in creation, and the great mother and great father supreme being. So we know who we are. So okay. So that is what we wanted to share. I just also want to show people that we have, let me show this other screen real quick. Okay, so we have coming up, this is beginning Monday. We have the next 4-week meditation instructor certification. So we have a certification course. We've been teaching SUSUW, the ancient term for meditation. We've been teaching SUSUW for 20 years. We've been practicing for 30 years, but we've been teaching and we're publishing on meditation SUSUW from an ancestral culture perspective for the past 20 years and so forth. We are teaching a certification course so you can become a meditation instructor. And once you're certified, you can take that certification. You can go to schools, after school programs, places of employment, women's shelters, human services agencies, and conduct meditation sessions. Various organizations, places of employment, they are they bring people on to teach meditation for, a session once a week or once a month. They'll bring people in, give you $100, $200, $300 to do a 30-minute session. For places of employment, for example, it enhances productivity for people just doing basic meditation. That's good for their bottom line. So they bring that in. It reduces stress and anxiety for children in charter schools, as well as independent schools, as well as public schools. Some of them are implementing meditation at the beginning of, the day, after the first bell, and also after the, lunch and so forth, and after school programs, because a few minutes of meditation in the morning focus the child for the rest of that morning and also the rest of the afternoon. And they've shown scientifically that it enhances outcomes, reduces stress, anxiety, enhances learning outcomes. Going to human services organizations where, like women's shelters, they need assistance. They're trying to get housing. They may be overcoming some drug issue and so forth, or some anxiety, depression, and so forth. They have treatment plan meetings. They also have group therapy and so forth. They'll bring somebody in once a week, once every few days, once every other week, or even once a month. Pay you a couple $100 to conduct meditation sessions to enhance outcomes, reduce stress, anxiety, to help with weight loss, number of different things. So there are many different applications for that. Some people do it as a side business to generate income for themselves. Some people do it as a full time. They'll have one school on Monday. They'll do a half an hour session there. Shelter on Tuesday, another school on Wednesday, somebody's job on Thursday, another school on Friday, and they'll work basically 40 minutes a day, make $100 to $200 a day doing that, $500,000 or $600 a week, whatever it is, and they'll do that full time. So that's one of the reasons we decided to put this certification in motion. We've taught this for a number of years. We have our online courses and so forth, but people were asking if we did a certification. We hadn't done the certification. We were letting other people do that and so forth, and we were just teaching, but some people didn't want to get their certifications from some of these other organizations that give you misinformation. They give you accurate information mixed with misinformation that you're paying for. Some of them charge thousands of dollars for these certifications. So we decided to go ahead and, teach SUSUW from an ancestral culture perspective. You see here, Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, 3,300 years ago, one of the common meditative postures and so forth. The practice of meditation, as well as, we'll even show you this real quick. One of our books goes into some detail about this. One of our books is Ankh, the origin of the term yoga, Karakasa, the origin and nature of the chakra. And in that book, we show etymologically and cosmologically how the term Ankh is the origin of the term yuka or yonk or yoke and so forth. Even the spelling of one of the spellings of the word Ankh, you'll see that the Ankh is around the neck of the animal in the form of a yoke and so forth. In Proto-Indo-European, when they say yonk or yoke or yunk, is the origin of the term yuka or yoga and so forth. The yoke and yoga, they don't understand that Ankh, which was corrupted into yonk, is around the neck of the sacred animal in the form of a yoke, but it's also dealing with the spirit body being yoked, the ba and the ka, the spirit and the soul, bayat and kayat, being yoked together, drawn together, and so forth. There's an entire cosmology that revolves around that predates India by thousands of years. And then we also this is that common meditative posture. You see Neb Merutef sitting in the common meditative posture, the spiritual entity shown as the sacred Anan or baboon of Tahuti and so forth. But that's a spiritual force that he's sitting listening to. He's in meditation, in SUSUW meditation with that spiritual entity and so forth. We show the common meditative posture here. You see the various divinities dealing with that. We show that kara is the origin of the term kakra or chakra and so forth. And we go into the cosmology of the different 7 shrines of the body and so forth, and the deities associated with these 7 shrines, thousands of years prior to Hinduism and so forth. The sacred knots in the text of Kamit, these 7 sacred knots and deities associated with the 7 sacred knots that govern the spirit body of the person. Those sacred knots are found in the nerve ganglia, the bunches of nerves in the same position of the 7 karu. And there's an invocation in Kamit to the you 7 knots, the arms of the balance on the night of setting the sacred eye in order. There's a whole invocation to those 7 sacred knots governed by 7 divinities in the cosmology of Kamit, woven into the fabric of the cosmology thousands of years before Hinduism has anything to do with that. So we show that the kara is a shrine, a kara that encases divinities, shrines or centers of resonance for certain deities. We talk about who those deities are. So in our course, we give detailed information. When we're teaching meditation to young people and people in, as well as adults in these different settings, we give it to them in an introductory fashion focused on outcomes. No different than someone teaching Pilates, and they can derive a tangible benefit from that immediately. If someone meditates and they calm themselves and, reduce stress and anxiety and become more focused and more disciplined and so forth, we teach it in that context. Now, if they want to learn more about cosmology and culture and spiritual cultivation, we can do that outside of the meditation. They can reach out and, we can teach that outside of the meditation sessions that we would conduct at a school or a place of business or a shelter or a community organization and so forth. A community center where they have a meditation once a week, or they have a yoga class once a week, or a meditation class once a week, or a dance class once a week. We teach that in the context. We teach it from a cultural perspective, but we also teach it from the context of an introductory practice that's, beneficial on a foundational level. But hold on a second. So, but that course, we're in the midst of teaching the first certification course now, which is going to be finishing on July 9th, but the next course begins on Monday night, this Monday, July 1st. So if you would like to register for that course, you can register. We have a split payment option, so you can make a 50% down payment to register and secure your spot. And then next week or the week after, you can make the, balance and so forth. But it begins July 1st and goes through July 22nd. And by July 22nd, you will receive your certification, and then you can take that certification and you can move forward and begin to teach. We also have a referral fee option. So if you refer the course to someone and they register, you can receive a $100 referral fee. So let me just show you that. We talked about that in one of our recent live broadcasts, and it's on our channel, so you can check that out to get the details of that. I just want to show you the actual flyer just so you can see it. But if you want the details of it, we did a whole, live session on that. Okay, so what that's about, just the simple breakdown of that. Our course is 4 weeks. Some of the 31 books that I've published are used in the course. Of course, those books are free downloads, so the materials are part of the course. Our 4-week course is $399. So it's basically $99 per week. As we said, you can do a split payment option, pay $199 to secure it for a deposit. And then you can pay the balance next week or the week after, to complete the payment. But we have a $100 referral fee. So basically, if you know somebody who is either interested in becoming an instructor or would be interested, or you're like, listen, if you want to do something entrepreneurial, something positive that impacts the Black community, where you can also get paid for doing something that serves youth as well as adults, young adults as well as seniors and so forth, because some people go into seniors' homes and teach, meditative practices because it assists with lowering blood pressure and anxiety and stress and everything else. If you know somebody who would benefit from that, they register and they pay $399 for the registration. You let them, they need to either inform us that you were the one who registered or referred them, or you can let us know, hey, I referred this person. So once that person, registers, that's one of the people I referred. And once they register and they pay the $399, we will send you $100. We'll PayPal you, Cash App you, whatever. Because if you hadn't turned us on to that individual, then we wouldn't have known, who they were. So you can reach more people than we can reach. And we're trying to get a team of Afro-Aikani people, African Black people around the country, empowering our people to reduce stress, increase learning outcomes, enhance productivity, lowering their blood pressure, dealing with weight loss, being more focused, disciplined in school or at work and everything else, or for their business, so they can enhance their lives. We need more of our people doing that, of course, transforming their lives, and we have the capacity to do that. And we can reach certain people, a certain amount of people, but you can reach people that we don't know about. So you refer some people, you can, for every person you refer, you receive that $100 referral fee. If you refer 4 people, then you receive $400, which actually pays for your course. If you refer 10 people, you receive $1,000. So this is a way for us to give back to people, support the work, empower our community, and also promote entrepreneurship in a positive capacity. So, but the class starts Monday, so people need to register. We have a few, we have a number of spaces left open for people to, register. Okay. Okay, so I just want to check out some of the comments. Okay, Yedase, we appreciate that. Medase for that donation. We really appreciate that. I want to make sure I didn't miss any comments in the chat room. Okay, it's up. Okay, Medase for that. We appreciate that. Okay, question. So goddess is actually a title of AMENET. Amen. Well, Gan or Gangan and Gangan Ur. So in the language of ancient Kamit, you could say Amen Ur, meaning Amen, the great, just like you have Heru, Ur, meaning Heru, the great. One of the titles of Amen is Gangan Ur. So Amen, Gangan Ur is Amen, the great Ur, Ganga or Gan, Ur, the great Gan, meaning the great gander, the great goose who, chants and brings things into being. So Amen is also called Her, which means falcon and so forth. It's shown in the form of the head of a falcon and so forth sometimes. He's also called Ba. The term Ba in ancient Kemet means ram. So sometimes Amen is shown in the form of the great Ba, the great ram. And in fact, let me show this. One of the reasons we had this image right here, let me show that once again. This mountain right here is the mountain, the Wab Ju, or the purified mountain and so forth. They call it Gebel Barkal or Jebel Barkal now. Let's pull up some information about that real quick. We're going to show you this sacred temple. Okay. So that sacred mountain, there's a temple in that region in ancient Kamit, ancient Nubia, and so forth. And let's just show you that. So this is the temple and so forth. But what's important, when you see this pinnacle right here in the temple, when you go inside, if you look here, so when the just pull that up. Okay, so it's not showing. Let me go back out and go back in. All right, so you should be able to see this now. All right, so that temple, this is just an image of that, but inside the temple, that great pinnacle, when the people of Kamit, when they, went further south into Kanit, into Nubia, and they saw that great mountain with the flat top and so forth, they recognized that as the seat, the ancient seat and sacred original shrine of the divinity Amen as well as AMENET. They saw that sacred mountain as his, natural shrine. So they would have coronations in Kamit, for kingship and so forth, but they would also travel all the way down to ancient Kanit into Nubia to go to this Wabju, the purified mountain and so forth, and hold coronations there as well. And inside the mountain and so forth, they would show that Amen is seated inside the mountain. And that great pinnacle, representative of the great serpent, sometimes Amen takes the form of the great serpent, Irta or Arita or Kamutef and so forth, with the great crown and so forth. So that great mountain represented the original purified shrine, natural formation of Amen. Hold on 1 second. And then you will see hold on 1 second. Want to get a better picture of the rams and so forth. Okay, so this is moving a little slow. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, so these are just different forms. I just wanted to show you, since you asked about the, actually that's a made up one, but this is one of the sacred rams of Amen and so forth. For some reason, it was taking a minute to pull up, but it should be up now. Let me see. Okay, so this is a ram, sacred animal totem. Sometimes Amen takes the form of the ram. So in that context, he, instead of being called Gan, or the great goose, great gander, he'll be called Ba, which is the term for ram. When he takes the form of a falcon, he's called Her or Heri, the great falcon, and so forth. When he takes the form of a lion, he's Ru, the great lion, and so forth. So a serpent, he's called Irta, or a Kamutef, the great serpent, and so forth. So whatever animal totem form he takes, that's what it is. But yes, Ga, he's called the great gander. All right, so we are, actually, I'd only planned to initially do like a 40-minute session, but we are at, we're like 2 hours. So we can end it right here. So once again, we want to say Yedase, we thank everybody for joining in. If you go on the SUSUW page on the website, let me pull up that page right quick. So that is the
SUSUW
trailer
Meditation
that we use.
Instructor Certification. SUSUW
So
is
when
the
you see
ancient
that trailer,
Akan
that's
term for
basically
meditation. SUSUW originated in
all you really need to show people. You can just send them to the page, as far as the referral fee and so forth. And once they see the page, they'll see the information, they'll see the trailer, they'll see a number of different presentations, live presentations we've done on SUSUW, on meditation for the past few weeks. They can check those out. And, that in and of itself will give them all the information they need to see what the class is about. We also did a 1 hour introductory session to talk about what the course is all about. That's on the page as well. And let me see. Hold on a second. This is the introductory session that we did right here. And when you scroll down, you see the flyer, you see the payment options and so forth, and a number of the different sessions that we did on SUSUW meditation over the past few weeks, so people can, get an idea of what's taking place. So we appreciate everybody joining in. We look forward to connecting with you all on Monday. For those of you who are joining the certification course, it's going to be a, great sessions and so forth. If you have any questions, just hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, email session, and so forth on kwesiakan@gmail.com, as well as the, links. Odwirafo on Instagram, Odwirafo on Twitter, Odwirafo, as well as Kwesiakan on Facebook, and Odwirafo on TikTok. So once again, Yerase, we thank everybody for joining in, and Yebe Shabio, we will meet again. That's it.